tried to have it refinished, but nobody.
I was watching it rain.
Oh, really? It rained that?
Oh, yeah. Raining hard right there when we were sitting there eating.
Today is Tuesday, August 10th, 1999. My name is Steve Hilker. We're at 713 Kitty Hawk Way, North Palm Beach, Florida. This is Robert C. Hilker Sr., my father, and Paul J. Costello, my good friend. Two gentlemen who had a little experience in a historical event called World War II. And Dad, if you could sort of lead off there, if you could give us sort of an idea of when and where you were at when the United States got into a little political dispute with the Empire of Japan and the Third Reich.
I was at Riverside Military Academy in Gainesville, Georgia in 1941, and I graduated from there in June of 1941. At that time, let's see, the Pearl Harbor took place in the fall of 1941.
And so you were you were like an 18-year-old senior in high school at Riverside Military Academy in Gainesville, Georgia, and graduated in June of 41?
That's correct.
Okay, and
Oh,
after...
wait a minute. Excuse me. I graduated June of 42.
Okay,
and
so...
Pearl Harbor took place in 41.
So you were still a senior at Riverside when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess you remember that day like most Americans who were alive then.
Yep.
And so you completed your senior year at Riverside.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was, December 7th, 1941, when Pearl Harbor was bombed. It was on a Sunday. We the whole Corps of Cadets was at chapel, and when we came out, we heard the news on the radio, and did not know where Oahu, Hawaii was, never heard of it. We were shocked like everybody else that the United States was being attacked.
So you, I suppose, completed your senior year at Riverside then.
Right.
And you graduated when?
In June of 1942.
Okay, when you graduated, what did you do then?
Returned home to West Palm Beach.
In the state of Florida?
In the state of Florida, and I prepared to enter Auburn University.
Okay, and what was your ambition in entering Auburn? What were you planning on studying?
I was going to become an aeronautical engineer.
Okay, and so you spent the summer of 42, I suppose, in West Palm Beach, Florida.
That's correct.
Okay. Did you have to register for the draft?
Yes, I did.
Okay, but I guess you weren't drafted at that point.
No.
Okay, and you can tell us why?
My number didn't come up.
Okay, it was a lottery system then.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so what'd you do at the end of the summer of 42?
The end of the summer, I left for Auburn, Alabama.
Okay.
And entered the University of Auburn.
Okay.
And, as a freshman, and spent a semester there, approximately a semester.
Okay.
And my roommates all got drafted, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew that it was a matter of weeks before I would be gone with them.
So we're talking late fall of 42 at this
Right.
point. Okay, so did you stay through Christmas at Auburn?
No. So
Okay.
I left Auburn and returned home in early November of 1942.
Okay, and what'd you do when you arrived home at West Palm Beach? In the state of Florida.
Well, I was thinking about entering the service because I did not want to be drafted.
How old were you then?
18.
Okay, and so what did you do when you got home here to West Palm Beach?
A friend of mine, Don Roberts, his name is, went with me down to the post office. I was going to enlist in the Navy. I had the submarine service in mind,
Mm-hmm.
and he had the Marines in mind.
Okay.
So we went to our respective recruiting offices, and the Navy recruiter told me I was too tall for the submarines. Said I'd bang my head on the overhead valve handles and pipes, etc. So it disappointed me, and I came out of there very dejected. My friend Don Roberts came out of the Marine office and said, why don't you come with me, join the Marines? So I said, okay. Went in there and they took me.
Now that would have been November or so of 42?
November of 42.
Okay.
And so they put us both on a bus a couple of days later in the early morning
Mm-hmm.
with a bunch of other recruits. We went up through Indian Town.
That's
and,
just north of West Palm in the rural part of Martin County?
right, they bought us a breakfast there.
Yeah.
We left the post office around 6:30 in the morning. We went to Indian Town and ate breakfast.
At the Seminole Inn?
Yes, matter of fact, it was a Seminole.
Only place in town still today.
And then on to Orlando at the main recruiting station for the Marine Corps.
Okay, and what happened in Orlando?
Oh, they checked it. They checked us in there and gave us a physical.
Mm-hmm. Did you pass the physical?
I passed the physical, and my friend Don, who was a weightlifter and a real specimen of a person, failed it because of his eyesight.
Okay.
In those days, the Marines didn't take anybody that wore glasses.
Okay.
And so he didn't have perfect eyesight, so he failed it. He was very dejected. The next day, they swore us in, not Don, they sent Don back home to West Palm Beach. He eventually went into the paratroopers for the Army paratroopers.
Mm-hmm.
They swore us in and put us on a Pullman train, by golly, really nice accommodations, overnight ride to Yemassee, South Carolina, where we were ceremoniously greeted by a DI, a drill instructor, and loaded onto a open bed cattle car truck and driven to Parris Island Recruit Depot.
So this was like Thanksgiving time 42.
Well, this was November the 14th, 1942.
Oh, okay. A little bit before Turkey Day there.
It's November the 14th in Orlando, so this is like the 15th or...
Okay.
And as the truck with all of us on board drove into the entry roads of Parris Island,
This was in South Carolina?
South Carolina, the recruits that were in training there continued to yell at us, "You'll be sorry."
So that was your introduction to the United States Marine Corps.
Right.
Okay, well, when you first arrived, besides the somewhat ignominious greeting by the other recruits, trainees, what else happened?
Okay, well then they drove us to the main station and offloaded us from the bus, or from the truck, excuse me. We didn't ride the bus, we rode the open truck. And herded us into a barber shop where immediately we lost all of our hair. Then through the quartermaster department, and were issued all the, we were just divested of our civilian clothes. They were put into a cardboard box, and we had dressed them, and they were sent them back home. They issued dungarees, khakis, and the tailor measured it up for the dress, for the green uniform, the green wool uniform. They did not have blues because they were discontinued during the war as excess expense. And then we were issued a bucket and a brush and a bar of soap, toilet articles, a Frank Buck pith helmet, and we were assigned to platoon 970.
Okay.
And the DI, drill instructor, and his assistant organized us into a somewhat ragged formation of a platoon and marched us off across the parade ground, which was then unpaved. It was all sand, to the H barracks, H-shaped, excuse me, Navy type barracks.
It's like a glass of water or something?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, go ahead.
Double-decker barracks on the swamp side of the what we call the grinder, where all the marching took place.
Okay.
And we were put into the lower deck. Our platoon was in the lower decks of that barracks.
So that was your first day at Parris Island.
Right.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about your basic training there with the United States Marine Corps at Parris Island in November of 1942?
Well, the first morning about 4 a.m., the DI came in banging a garbage can lid and blowing a whistle, and we were rudely awakened and told to hit the deck
Mm-hmm.
and fall out in front of the barracks for some physical education. So we did that. He soon organized us into a little more disciplined group, and began to teach us marching, drilling, and later in the day we were issued, in those days, the Springfield 03 was the only firearms we had. The M1 Garand hadn't come out yet.
Right.
So we were issued the 03.
Okay. And how long were you at Parris Island?
12 and a half weeks.
Okay, and what was the course of basic training that you experienced during that 12 and a half weeks at Parris Island, South Carolina? I guess they call that the United States Marine Corps Training Depot.
Yeah, that's a recruit depot.
Okay.
All right, the course of training was to break you down from your former ego and esteem into like a massive putty, and then
Okay.
they remolded you into the image and the form that the United States Marine Corps thought you should be. So
How do they do that?
they did that by the DIs used very good psychological methods on you, and the drilling was intense. The physical training was intense. We had to work as a group. If one person screwed up, the whole platoon suffered for it. One person caused a problem, like when they had a inspection of the barracks, there was one little tiny spot on the deck. So we were forced to scrub, all of us were forced to get our buckets and water and toothbrushes and scrub the deck of the barracks with toothbrushes all night long until they kept coming in to check it and rejecting it. It was like 2:30 in the morning before they finally said it was okay. And then we were up at 4 for continual drilling.
We have a little sabbatical we have to take for just a minute here, so let's take a break here. 1, 2, 3. Back on after a little bit of brief recess here. I think, Dad, you were talking about the breaking down the fellas and training with the Marines to remold them into the type of people the Marine Corps needed to accomplish their mission. You were talking about 2:30 a.m. Finally getting done with the toothbrush cleaning situation. So what happened after that?
Well, that was just one example. Similar episodes took place all during the training. They were teaching you that you work together as a unit, one for all and all for one.
Okay.
They were instilling in you the idea that you don't work as an individual, you work together as a unit. And so after similar episodes of different varieties took place and different amounts of punishment, we drilling every day, we became proficient in what do they call it, short order drill, close order drill, and the manual of arms. And I remember when we were drilling with our rifles, and they gave the command to the rear march, and a couple of guys would always invariably turn the wrong way. So the DI said, halt, and he had everybody fix bayonets. But he fixed the bayonets, and then he gave us to the rear march. Everybody turned the correct way in unison.
I wonder why.
So anyway, this went on, and we finally became proficient in both the close order drill and manual arms, and we're working together as a unit. They took us to several film reviews on sanitation and personal and field sanitation. Had a lot of lectures. We were especially instilled with the idea of being able to field strip the rifle, know every part of it, put it back together blindfolded. We had to keep that rifle absolutely spotless. They inspected the rifle frequently. If they found anything wrong with it, you had to sleep with your rifle that evening, and not lengthwise of the bunk, crosswise in the middle of the bunk. A little difficult, kind of uncomfortable. And so eventually, after this training molded us all together as a functioning platoon, then the last of the session, I think it was the last week, we went out to the rifle range, and they checked us into Quonset huts on the rifle range. No, we didn't get to Quonset huts. We weren't that lucky. We were in tents. And this was winter time, and it was not too comfortable. Then the rifle range instructors took over and taught us how to fire the rifle upon the range. at the end of the training on the rifle range, we had to fire up a record and see who could qualify.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most all of us qualified.
Okay. This was like 12 weeks into basic?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we had at the beginning, along with your other equipment, they issued the red jacket manual, which is the Marine Corps manual. I think the Navy called it their blue jacket manual. What's that right, Paul? Blue jacket manual?
That's right.
But we had a red jacket manual, and it was a book that had all the information you needed, like an instruction manual.
Mm-hmm.
We were supposed to learn the essential parts of that manual, and we had a final inspection by a lieutenant colonel, I believe he was, and he came through and checked all of your 782 gear, what they call the 782 gear, your pack and your rifle and your entrenching tool and your helmet and all the combat gear that you needed. And he checked it all, asked you questions about the function of different parts of the gear, and asked you questions that were contained in the red jacket manual.
Mm-hmm.
And after the inspection was over, that was the final part of the training.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were made Marines.
Okay.
The next morning we had to fall out and assemble in front of the barracks, and we were assigned different places, different parts of the Marine Corps that we were going for our next duty station.
Okay. And how was that selected? By your test results or something like that? Or?
Well, during the course of training, they gave us we went over and took a aptitude test,
Uh-huh.
and we were interviewed as to what we had done prior to entering the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them that I had been a plumber's apprentice for about maybe a year, and so forth. I thought maybe I'd be assigned to something having to do with part of that, but such was not the case. They sent me I was assigned to the Signal Battalion, Camp Lejeune, New River, North Carolina.
Okay. So you finished up at Parris Island, I guess, late January, early February 43.
Well, it was in January, yeah.
43.
43.
Okay.
And they shipped me by train up to Jacksonville, North Carolina,
Okay.
which is right outside the base of Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
And then picked up there by a truck and taken into Hodnot Point,
Okay.
where they had some brick barracks, and assigned to one of the Signal Battalion's barracks.
All right. And how long were you there?
Let's see, we entered a training school on basic electricity, which lasted, I think it lasted about a month.
Okay.
There were 50 of us in the class, and it was an accelerated course. And at the end of the course, 28 of us made enough passing grades to go on to the next level,
Okay.
and the others were shipped to line company, what they call a line company. So 28 of us were shipped from there to Grove City College, Pennsylvania, which is 40 miles north of Pittsburgh.
Okay. How long were you at Camp Lejeune?
probably 5 to 6 weeks.
Okay. So you pass muster to go up to Grove City.
Right. Then up to Grove City, we entered a civilian college.
So this would have been like in March or so of '43?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we entered a civilian college, which is a heavily endowed institution, beautiful campus and buildings.
This was Grove City College, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Okay. And
Grove City.
what'd you all do at Grove City?
All right. The course there was radio and electronics, and they taught us. We learned everything about radio circuits, electronic circuits, and we had to actually build a radio receiver
Mm-hmm.
while we were there. It was a very good accelerated course. And we enjoyed being at that civilian college because we were living in dormitories, although this one dorm was nothing but Marines. And we ate in their cafeteria, and they had co-eds there, and we enjoyed that. And it was winter time, it was snowing. Being from Florida, I saw my first snow there. So at the conclusion of that course, if you made a high enough grade, you were sent to the next level. And I think out of the 28, 15 of us were sent to the next level. So they kept weeding them out.
Mm-hmm.
When I left Camp Lejeune, I was a PFC. When I left Grove City College, I was made corporal.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was shipped to Airborne Radar Training Center, Warren Island. It was a Naval Air Training Center, Warren Island, Corpus Christi, Texas. I asked to be sent to the Radar Training Center at what's the name of the
Hope Sound,
up here north of West Palm, north of Jupiter?
Jupiter Island,
No,
Stewart,
which is now it's a state park.
Jonathan Dickinson Park,
Yeah, but those,
Camp Murphy.
Camp Murphy. That was a Army Radar Training Center. So that was one of the bases that you could ask for. I asked for that, and my buddy from
That's because, why?
because it's right next to West Palm Beach.
Where your hometown was.
Hometown.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I asked to be sent there. My buddy from Houston, Texas, he asked to be sent to Warren Island, and of course, he ended up in Camp Murphy, and I ended up in Warren Island, Texas.
So your buddy from Texas ended up getting training on radar in Florida, where you were from, and you ended up getting training on radar in Texas, where he was from.
Correct.
Okay.
That's par for the course.
Okay. So what'd you do at Ward Island?
At Warren Island, there was airborne radar that we were studying, and his type of training at Camp Murphy was land-based radar, with what we call bed springs, the big radar antennas, and all of ours was built for airborne. That course was another accelerated course. It was very good. In those days, radar was highly secret, and you had to go into at Ward Island. They had the outer perimeter of the base, and then they had another base within a base, which was where the radar training went, and it was really hush-hush secret stuff, and you had to sign an oath that you would not talk about or discuss anything you learned or anything you were doing on the outside with anyone. So anyway, we went through training there, And those of us that made a certain grade, I think it was above 90%, were made staff sergeants, and those that made less were made buck sergeants. So I was lucky enough to be made staff. So we graduated from there, and I was shipped to Miramar.
Now, how long were you at Ward Island?
Oh, Ward Island, let's see, we were there about 3 months.
Okay, so now we're talking July or August of 43.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we were shipped to.
So you finished radar school at Ward Island in the mid to late summer of 43.
Yeah.
You passed, got promoted to staff sergeant, and what happened?
Then I was shipped to San Diego, and just north of San Diego was a casual company at Miramar. Well, a base called Miramar. A casual company means it's just mixed up hodgepodge of people from all different professions, I was going to say, or training levels in the Marine Corps, and we spent about 4 or 5 days there, falling out and meeting the muster every morning and answering the roll call, and then during the day they'd have us picking up cigarette butts and trash off the ground.
And how long did this last?
4 or 5 days.
Okay.
And then I was assigned to El Toro Marine Corps Air Station at Santa Ana, California, which is 40 miles south of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shipped up there and assigned to a dive bomber squadron, VMSB 142, that had just come back from Guadalcanal. And was reorganizing.
Now this was like August, September of 43?
Near as I can recall it was, yeah.
Okay.
And so I was assigned there and put into the radio radar department.
Okay. And this was at El Toro?
El Toro Marine Corps Air Station.
40 miles south of LA in California.
And yeah.
Okay. And August, September or so of 43, how long were you there?
We were there training in the squadron while we reorganized for about 3 or 4 weeks, I believe it was.
Okay.
And then
What type of training did you do with this squadron? This is like a dive bomber squadron?
It was a dive bomber squadron, yeah.
Okay.
At that point, the pilots would fly every day to keep their skills up, and we would work on the equipment to keep our skills up.
What kind of equipment did you work on?
I worked on airborne radar.
Okay, radar inside the dive bomber.
Yes, and also what the IFF, which is identification friend or foe.
Okay. Let's take a little break here. For a brief recess here, we're going to pick up at, I think you were telling us about your training there at El Toro with the dive bomber squadron that was reorganizing after a little tea party at Guadalcanal. Is that right?
Yeah, they had been Guadalcanal, and when they came back, they reorganized at El Toro.
Okay.
And so we were new personnel. They had a few people, mostly the officers, that some of the officers and pilots had been in the overseas campaign with VMSB 142, but they were completely reorganizing the squadron, and so I was one of the new personnel. We got the there was to get us acquainted with the aircraft, the equipment in it, and the pilots. A lot of them were new, and they, of course, they had flown those type of aircraft before, but they had to fly it every day to keep their skills up.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to work on the equipment to keep our skills up.
Mm-hmm.
We had to train people that did not come through a training school, or they were just assigned to be helpers. We had to train them on what we wanted them to do with the equipment to help us work on it. And so it was a very enjoyable session. We got to go to Los Angeles on weekends, and went to the Palladium, which was a big dance hall, had all the big name bands there, and went to the Brown Derby and the Hollywood Canteen, with all the movie stars would come to entertain them.
So you got a chance to go to the Hollywood Canteen and the Brown Derby while you were there?
Yeah,
So this would have been like October, November of '43?
near as I remember, it's about right.
Okay. And how long were you training with this reorganized dive bomber outfit in El Toro in the fall of '43?
I think we trained there for about 6 weeks.
Okay.
And then we were shipped to, the whole squadron was shipped down to OGU, which stands for Outgoing Unit, in Miramar, again, down north of San Diego.
Yeah. That was
we
in
were waiting
California.
In San Diego, California. We were waiting there for transportation to the staging area, which had been Oahu, Hawaii.
In the Hawaiian Islands.
Right.
Okay, this was like November or so of '43?
Near as I can remember, I don't have the exact date.
And you
but
were, I guess, about 19 then, is that right?
Yes. So
Okay.
we waited at Miramar until a ship came in that would be the transportation for us.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we would go down to San Diego on Liberty on the weekends and go to the burlesque theater and stand in line 5 or 10 deep or 15 deep around the bars trying to, and they wouldn't serve us anybody that was under 21.
Mm-hmm.
But once in a while we were passed a drink by some of the guys that were 21.
Mm-hmm.
San Diego's a beautiful city. We enjoyed it. So then they took us by truck from the outgoing unit at Miramar down to North Island, San Diego, and to the Navy piers there, and there was a carrier, the San Jacinto was the name of it. It was a flat top built on a cruiser hull, and they put all of our aircraft up on the flight deck, and they put us up on cots on the hangar deck.
Mm-hmm.
And we left in the evening
Mm-hmm.
out past the harbor gates of San Diego, out to sea in the evening. And that evening, I remember at Chow.
This would have been like November of '43.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Okay.
And few miles off the coast, you got into these heavy swells.
Mm-hmm.
Several of the people had never been to sea before, and they had, it was a Sunday evening if I remember right, they had a nice meal, and we all went into the dining area of the chow hall. Mess compartment, I think the Navy called it. And the tables had ridges on them to keep the plates, keep the trays from sliding off onto the deck. And the ship hit these big swells, and pretty soon, when we had a table full of guys eating, there was only about 3 of us left. The rest of them decided they had enough and left. I think we had pork that night, if I remember right. And so, anyway, then the mess cook said...
Roast pork?
Yeah, the mess cook said, we got plenty of them left, anybody want seconds and thirds? So there was a lot of seasick guys going over. It was 5 days in transit from San Diego to Honolulu.
Okay.
And so finally they came into Pearl Harbor and into the anchorage there in Pearl Harbor, where all the carriers tied up.
Ford Island?
Ford Island, that's right. We tied up at Ford Island, and they took us over by a lighter to Pearl City, load us onto buses and out to our Marine Corps Air Station at Eva, EWA, but they pronounce it like EVA in Hawaiian. So we went to Eva, and we were assigned to a barracks there, and then our planes were offloaded, and they must have offloaded those planes onto an airstrip there at Pearl Harbor, and then had flown them into Eva. We didn't get to see that part of the operation go on.
What type of planes were these?
These were Douglas Dauntless SBDs, Scout Bombing Diver, dive bombings.
When you went into Pearl Harbor in, I guess it was November, early December of '43, were you able to observe any remaining evidence of the devastation of December 7th, 1941?
Oh yeah, we saw, what was it, the Arizona was, yeah, we saw the hulks, yeah. They still haven't cleaned up the mess. Most of it was taken care of, but still.
Okay. Did that have any emotional or psychological impact on you?
It made you mad.
Yeah.
Made you very disgusted, mad.
So how long were you in the barracks during the offloading of the planes?
Well, we got settled in the barracks, and then they took us out to the flight line, and we showed us where our squadron would be located, and
Was this at Eva Field?
yeah, at the field.
Okay. This is on Oahu and the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah. And then our planes came in, and they had what they call revetments, because they thought that Pearl Harbor or Oahu was still subject to attack. So we had the planes, instead of being parked out on a flight line, they were parked in these revetments, which were dome-shaped, like a half dome, and they were open on one side, but the plane was be parked in there. It would take a direct hit in front of the open side to destroy the plane. If it hit any place else, it was protected the plane. So all the planes were put into these revetments, and then each day they would be taxied out onto the flight line, and they'd take off. So now this was a staging area, and this is where the training took place. Serious training took place for getting ready to go south into the South Pacific. And every day the pilots would practice dive bombing I had to train the pilots and gunners, the aerial gunners, on how to use the radar. And each day we had a TBM, a torpedo bomber, assigned to our squadron to do the training, and I was getting the back with the aerial gunners, and it had the same type of radar as our SPDs, and we take off and go around Oahu, and we used an island near Maui, a small island near Maui, as a target, and we home in on it with the radar and simulate like we were dropping a bomb, using radar as the navigation.
Mm-hmm.
So did a lot of that, plus the usual maintenance of the equipment, and had to train the pilots and gunners on the ground on use of the IFF, identification friend or foe. So it was a real intense training session in this staging area there, which went on.
So like at this time you were, I guess, 19, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. And this was radar inside of these dive bombers.
Right.
Okay. So how long did this training last on Oahu, Hawaiian Islands?
Let's see, I think we got ready to go south in the South Pacific about, I think we were there in Hawaii about
This was on the island of Oahu
Oahu.
in the Hawaiian island chain.
Yeah,
It was in the United States territory.
it was a territory then, it was not a state.
Okay. This was like November, December of 43.
Yeah, I think we trained there for about 8 to 10 weeks.
Okay. Okay.
And
Remember
then-
spending Christmas in Hawaii in 43?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I remember Bob Hope came out to the airfield at Eva to entertain us.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Hope and his entire troop of entertainers came there to entertain us. We all the enlisted men got out there on the airstrip at like the crack of dawn to get a place to watch Bob Hope and his entertainers, Jerry Colonna and the Les Brown band and so on, and we were all crowded in front of the stage which was set up for him from early morning until about 11 o'clock that day, and it got very, very hot, but everybody stayed right where they were. And then about 11 o'clock, when the show was just about ready to begin, the MPs came out and moved all of the enlisted men back like a couple hundred feet back away from the stage area, and let the officers come in, and they put chairs there for them. We were just sitting on the deck. And of course, Bob Hope was behind the curtains there watching all this. And he came out and sat on the edge of the stage and said, you know, I've entertained the officers last night at their O Club, and here they are pushing the enlisted men back. He said, I was supposed to entertain enlisted men today. He said, I'm not going to do this show until they're allowed to come back up here where they were. And boy, everybody cheered, and the general in charge of the base got up and he had whispered to his executive officer, and then the next thing you know, the MPs took the ropes down and everybody moved forward. He was, Bob Hope, from that point on, was our favorite person.
Mm. So you finished your training, I guess, Christmas, New Year's, Christmas 43, New Year's 44 in Oahu, Hawaii, and then what happened?
Oh, before we left there, we had one false alarm. We were all directed to take our rifles and 782 gear and helmets and go down to where the planes were at the revetments to protect them, because they had a report of a Japanese invasion force coming toward Oahu. So we were all, all down there ready to do battle, and after about 4 or 5 hours,
This was after Midway?
yes, about 4 or 5 hours later, the alert went off and all clear, and they found out it was a false alarm.
Okay.
So then anyway, they got ready to leave, and they loaded us on board went down to Pearl City, to Ford Island, and they loaded us on board a Liberty ship that had been converted to a baby, what they call a Jeep carrier. They put a flat top on top of the Liberty ship hull. And they put us on board that. That was the San Jacinto. I was trying to think of the name of it. No, let's see. I can't remember the name of the ship we came over on. No, I guess that was San Jacinto. Anyway, they put us on board the baby Jeep carrier, loaded all our planes up on the deck, flight deck, and we were fortunate enough to sleep down below. I guess we were fortunate. It was kind of tough. They had bunks 5 high. They had bunks 5 high, and I got the top one underneath one of the air ducts. They didn't have air conditioning those days, but they did have, the ships had forced air ventilation, and right above my bunk was a inspection plate that had been not welded too good, and I pulled it loose, and I got some air right blowing on me, so I was very fortunate, because we were going down to the hot South Pacific. So the ships that pulled out and formed into a convoy, and we sailed zigzag for 30 days and 30 nights. And we had tin cans for escorts, destroyers, DEs, destroyer escorts. You could see them over in the horizon zigzagging around. We zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. 30 days and 30 nights, we never saw land. And they...
Did you know where you were going?
No.
Okay.
I had no idea.
Did you know what you were going to do?
We knew what we were going to do, but we didn't know where we were going.
What did you think you were going to do?
We knew we were going into combat.
Okay.
So they halfway down for a couple of days, they flew a drone, which was a remote controlled aircraft, and they flew the drone, and the ship's anti-aircraft batteries would fire at it to see if they could sharpen their skills. Anyway, after 30 days and 30 nights at sea, we finally made landfall. And
Where'd you make landfall?
3 degrees south of the equator at a place called Emiru, E-M-I-R-A-U, which was in the north end of Bismarck Archipelago. Oh, incidentally, on the trip down, we crossed the equator, and we were all of us who had never crossed the equator were initiated into the royal realm as shellbacks. King Neptune and his bride, his queen, came on board. There's a couple of sailors that were dressed up like king and queen, and then they had the royal baby, which was the fattest sailor they had on the ship. They had a diaper on him, and they were all ensconced in like a throne on the hangar deck. They had all of us pollywogs crawling across the deck with our nose to the deck, and they had the electric prods, and they like cattle prods, and they would zap us with electric prods. It gives a little jolt. And they cut our hair into crazy designs, and they get up to the royal throne there, and they would assign different penalties to you. Mine was I had to kiss the royal baby's belly button. They took a big bucket of mustard and a 10-inch paintbrush, and they dipped it in the mustard and swabbed it across the belly of this fat kid. And then they told you to kiss the baby's belly button, and they get up close to the belly button, and they push your head into the mustard. Of course, we all had different designs cut in our hair, and preceding this ceremony, for a whole day, they kept, over the ship's intercom, they kept telling you, beware, you pollywogs, King Neptune's coming aboard, beware, beware, you know. So it was impressive. And the thing about it was the officers that were pollywogs had to suffer the same as we did. They showed no mercy for anybody. And then the end of that royal court, you were sent through a belt line, a shillelagh line they call them. The Swabbies that have their canvas shillelaghs, they were like canvas bags, like a size of a baseball bat, and they're stuffed with rags, I guess. And they used them, you were in a double line, and you went through like a belt line. And as you run through it, they clunk you with it. And when you got to the end of that, it was on the fantail, and they had this big tank, big heavy canvas tank set up in a wood frame full of water. And they had a seat, a wood seat on a hinge, and you had to sit with your back toward the tank and the hinge, and then the sailor would dump you over backwards into the water, and from that point on you were a pollywog. I mean, you were a shellback. You were no longer a pollywog. One big gyrene, when the sailor tumped him over, he reached and grabbed the sailor and pulled him in with him. So he had some fun. Anyway, that was a lot of fun. And then when we crossed the international date line, it was Saturday, and instantly it became Sunday. So that was fun.
What, after this hijinks on the high seas crossing the equator occurred, how long did it take you guys to get to your destination of action?
Well then, I don't remember how many days after that before we got to
This
land.
was, I guess, around New Year's 44.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, late December 43, very early January 44.
Yeah,
Okay.
about right. So then we got to Emerue, the island of Emerue, which was a French protectorate, and at the copra plantation, they had a bunch of coconut trees planted there, and there was the plantation owner had a house, kind of a large house there. And,
Well, did you pull up to a pier at Emerue and
Oh no.
had a brass band welcome you to the island, or?
We laid two off of the island,
Yeah.
and they had LCVPs, the landing craft vehicle personnel, pull up, and they threw cargo nets over the side of the ship, and we loaded up with all of our 782 gear, packs, rifles, bandoliers of ammo. We were heavily loaded with everything that we had, all of our equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to crawl down the cargo nets and get into the LCVPs, which out in the ocean they were going up and down, maybe 10, 12, 15 feet variation. And back where we got on, the stern of the ship slanted in like this. And when you got down, halfway down the cargo net, and you got to the point where you didn't have the side of the ship anymore, then your feet went under the incline, and you were almost horizontal, hanging onto the cargo net, and then the LCVP going up and down in the waves. Some guys missed this thing and fell into the ocean. Some guys got banged up a little bit, hit they let go at the wrong timing and hit the deck of the LCVP when it was coming up and they were coming down. But most of us got on board okay. Then these landing craft all organized into a kind of a formation.
Right.
And we headed toward the beach.
Okay.
Well, we found out when we got onto the beach that later we found out that as we landed on the beach, the Japanese force that was on Emaru, at the same time we were landing, they left the south end. We landed on the north end. They were leaving the south end.
Oh, okay.
So they left when we came on.
Okay.
So there was no actual combat there. So we just came on unopposed.
This was like the January, 1944.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a little. Well, we're back on here with Robert C. Hilker Sr. And I believe before our little break took place, you were talking about the invasion of Emaru in the Bismarck Archipelago in late December, early January of late December 1943, early January 44. Is that about right?
Well, it was actually before we left Emaru around Christmas time, so it had to be September of 44.
September of 44?
Wait a minute. Where were we, 43 or 44?
I think you were in Hawaii in late 43 doing the training with the dive bomber squadron.
Let's see.
As best you can recall. I realize it's been like 55, 60 years. You know, like a little bit in the past, you know.
I know we left Emaru. We left Emaru to go to the Philippines right around Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, the Philippine invasion, I believe, of Luzon was in November of 44. I think.
not of Luzon, of Leyte.
Leyte Gulf. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
And we left around Christmas time to augment the forces that were going to invade Luzon. But so we had to be on Emaru during the summer of that year,
mm-hmm. 44.
44.
Okay, so tell us, you guys got to Emaru after you left Hawaii, and you invaded Emaru.
Yes, and then
Okay.
we set up camp area in the jungle.
Did the Japanese heavily fight for Emaru?
No, they left as I said before, they left the south end of it and departed as we were coming in the north end. So, it was a unopposed invasion.
Mm-hmm.
So we set up the camp area and we set up our tents, what they call squad tents, and there were four men to each tent. And we dug foxholes next to our cots. We slept on cots. They dug foxholes next to the cots in case we had a bombing raid. We just jump into the foxhole. And on Emeroo, the CBs constructed two airstrips.
We got some August 1999 Thunder Boomers here in Palm Beach County, but let's go back to 1944 at Emeroo. Go ahead.
Right. CBs constructed two airstrips out of a crushed coral rock. They were parallel to each other. They're single strips. One was a bomber strip, the other was a fighter strip. And in between, we had these revetments to protect the aircraft. And our tents for the radio shack and the ordnance shack and ready room for the pilots and so forth and so on. All of our equipment and buildings, not buildings, but tents were out there near the revetments where the aircraft were. And our main objective there on Emeroo was to fly south in the Bismarck Archipelago to Caviang, which is a Jap-held stronghold, and what was the other one?
I think it was called Rabaul.
Rabaul, yeah, Rabaul and Caviang. We were to bomb them and keep them harassed night and day. On Caviang, there was a outfit of Imperial Japanese Marines that had been bypassed, and the same as Rabaul, that was bypassed. And we just bombed them and kept them harassed night and day. We bombed them all day long. At nighttime, the black cats, which were PBYs, would keep them harassed by dropping bombs and empty beer bottles, which when they spun down would make a howling sound and keep them awake. Napalm was dropped on their rice fields. They were starting to grow rice to keep themselves sustained because they had no food. And the minute it looked like it was ready to harvest, well, they dropped napalm. We would drop napalm on it and burn it all up. There was a PT boat outfit on the south end of Emeroo, as well as an outfit of CBs, and there were some New Zealanders. We became very friendly with the New Zealanders. They were close to us in their camp, and they were nice guys. We enjoyed visiting with them. PT boats would make raids at night, machine gunning the emplacements around Rabaul and around Caviang. We lost one pilot at Caviang. The Imperial Japanese Marine gunner shot him down, and he was a real nice guy. We enjoyed knowing him, but we lost him. And we had a couple of bombing raids from the Japs. They flew over at night and dropped a few bombs, but none of them hit near our camp area. One raid was during the night when we were loading a Liberty ship to transport our men and supplies to the Philippine invasion, and we were loading that off the beach at Emaru with lighters that would carry the equipment and men out to the ship. And during the middle of the loading operation, we had an air raid, and they dropped a couple of bombs in the harbor there, but well, I say harbor, just offshore where the ships were, but they didn't hit anything. So, although we had a couple of air raids there at Emaru, we lost no personnel and we lost no equipment. So we were very fortunate.
Can you offer an opinion as to why the Japanese did not fight to hang on to Emaru?
At that point, they were losing on all fronts. They were.
This was very early 44, I guess.
Yeah. And our forces were building up and theirs were shrinking, and I believe that they just didn't have the wherewithal or the strength of the will to fight and keep Emaru.
So how long did you guys do these things on Emaru?
Well, let's see, we got there probably in summer. We were there probably 6 months. And then MacArthur requested our dive bombing squadron to our Marine Air Group Bag 32, MAG Marine Air Group Bag 32, to assist his invasion of Luzon, because he recognized that Marine dive bombers could pinpoint dive bombing just ahead of the front line troops, and he wanted Marine dive bombers in there to do this job. So that's the reason that we were ordered to assist in MacArthur's return to the Philippines. With the grace of God and a few Marines, MacArthur returned to the Philippines. So we packed up and loaded these Liberty ships with all our gear and equipment, and the planes had to fly the journey across the Pacific to the Philippines. And I flew with a load of equipment and sea bags in an R4D, which is the same as a DC-3. And all of our other planes flew wing on the R4D. And we flew from Emaru, I believe it was Christmas Day that we left, over to Hollandia in New Guinea. We landed there and gassed up, stayed overnight, and then flew from there to Peleliu, which was secured by Marines, and that was 7 or 8 hours of flying over the open Pacific with no land in sight. And we flew from Hollandia, New Guinea to Peleliu. On the R4D that I was flying in, there was a captain who was the Marine captain was the pilot, and first lieutenant was the co-pilot, and they had a PFC as a navigator. He was a celestial navigator, Marine PFC, and he did all the navigating, because all of our SBD dive bombers, the 25 dive bombers, were dependent on him to navigate us over open Pacific to the little tiny speck of land called Peleliu, and he would get up in the bubble at the flight deck and shoot the sun with the celestial navigation sextant. And he kept us on course, and he gave us an ETA of such and such time, and he missed the ETA by like 23 seconds, and we saw Peleliu, and we all landed. We lost one plane on the way there. He had an oil leak and had to ditch in the sea. So the plane was lost, but the pilot and gunner got into a life raft, and about an hour after they ditched the plane, excuse me, they were picked up by Dumbo, they called it, which was a PBY, very slow, and it was flying behind us. And they landed in the ocean and picked the pilot and gunner up. So we lost no people. We stayed overnight at Peleliu and refueled, and we talked to the Marine Security Force that were there on the island that had invaded Peleliu and secured it, and they were staying there as a mop-up detail. They were still out hunting the Japs that were hidden in the various caves on the island, and it was very interesting stories that they told us about their mop-up against the Japs. So then we left there, and meanwhile our main force was on the ships going to the Philippines, and we flew from there into Leyte at Tacloban Air Base in Leyte, which was these perforated steel mats for landing. We landed there, and we were under bombing raid when we landed, and there was still a bombing raid going on when we took off. And there was sniper fire, so the place wasn't secure that well at that point.
This was like in March or so of '44?
No, this was in, well, we took off Christmas, so this was just about the first of the year.
44. New Year's 44.
Well, no. This was Christmas of '44 when we left Emeru.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So it was around the first of the year when we got into the Philippines.
Okay.
And then,
First of 45.
yeah.
Okay.
So then we forget I've lost track of where we transferred from the aircraft, from that R4D to the ship. But I know we came into, we went around the south end of where Manila is, what do you call that? Can't remember. Went around the south end of the island of Luzon, and Corregidor. Went around Corregidor and up the west coast of Luzon on these ships. And we came into Lingayen Gulf, which is the west end of the island of Luzon. And then we offloaded into LCVPs again and went ashore and hit the beach just south of Dagupan. And the landing was went off fairly simple. It was hardly any problem at all. Maybe a little sniper fire. We drove through Dagupan and out into a rice paddy, and we set up our camp area in the rice paddy, and the Seabees constructed airstrip on the rice paddy, and we set up operations there east of Dagupan in Luzon to assist the troops that were going south to take Manila, and they pinpoint dive bombing just ahead of the troops going south to Manila. The Japanese they still held Clark Field, which is a big Army Air Force base at one time, but of course the Japs had it at this point, and they were sending bombers out of their air base at Clark Field to bomb us. We had bombing raids daily, usually at nighttime. So we assisted the troops going to Manila, pinpoint bombing ahead of them. We lost a couple of planes. I know our commanding officer, Major Barr, was shot down. He parachuted out, and his gunner never was found. Lost him. So when Manila finally was secured, then they decided to move us out of there. We were no longer needed, and they moved us to a staging area at Mindoro, which is another island south of Corregidor. So I was being a staff sergeant. I was assigned to take a squad of men down to the beach, Luzon, at Lingayen Gulf, and we had some LSTs, landing ship tank, that were going to transport us down to Mindoro. So we had all of our sea bags, belongings of each of our personnel, and all of our equipment in crates and boxes and so on, down on the beach, and myself and this squad of men that I had in charge of were living in tents down on the beach because we had to stay there and load around the clock. So we were loading the equipment into the ships, and while we were there, the Japs would raid at nighttime. They'd send bombers over and try to bomb our equipment on the beach, and we would go aboard the LST for protection because it had steel sides, and when the air raid would take place, there's a big pile of duffel bags, the Army called theirs. They didn't have sea bags, they had duffel bags. There was a big pile of duffel bags that this Army PFC was guarding. He sat on top of it with his rifle, and we had become friendly with him, talked to him and so on. And anyway, as the raid went on, the last we saw him, he was trying to get down off that duffel bag, pile of duffel bags, and then a bomb hit that pile of duffel bags and him direct, and just blew it all to smithereens. We were on board the LST at that time. Anyway, we loaded up the LST, and came time to leave, and the skipper of the LST could not get the LST off the beach. they always drop a stern anchor and they run up on the beach and open the bow doors, put the ramp down. But we were so heavily loaded he couldn't get off the beach. So what he did was have all of us, all the personnel, go to the stern, put the weight in the stern where the water was deeper, and then revved his engines up full speed and got the winch going, and he finally got us off. We were glad to get off before dark because being stranded on the beach, we were another sitting duck for the bombers. So we got organized into a convoy of LSTs, and we were escorted by DEs, destroyer escorts, and we went toward Mindoro as we went south and got, let's see, the next morning, early at dawn, we were off of Corregidor, and there was a submarine alert. So all the engines stopped, everything. It was eerie. All these ships, as far as you could see the horizon in every direction, everything just stopped. It was quiet. Just no movement. And a Navy destroyer escort, DE, was zipping around, and the skipper made all of us get down on the deck. He didn't want anybody up because if you got hit by a torpedo, the flash would burn you, you know, so shrapnel would hit you. So anyway, this DE stopped. They must have had sonar going because they had contacted a target, and all of a sudden a small Jap submarine surfaced right next to them. Now, why they ever did that, I'll never know, but they surfaced right next to the DE, and the DE had to crank their artillery piece down to almost hit the gunnel of the DE to get, and they just sat there and waited. As when the hatch opened, they let go, and it's just big orange ball of flame, and that was the end of the submarine and its personnel. So, so after that, there was no more contact with submarines. So then we continued on. The whole convoy continued on to Mindoro. We went into Mindoro, which is a staging area. They were gathering a whole big invasion force at Mindoro to go down and invade Mindanao, which is a southern island of the Philippines. And we were going to invade at Zamboanga, and it's just across the Straits of Borneo, just north of Borneo. Between Borneo and Mindanao is the Straits of Borneo. So the whole invasion force left to Mindoro when we got all assembled, and we were on LSTs again, and went down to southwest corner of Mindanao, near Zamboanga was the name of the city there, and a full-scale invasion took place. They had these ships with the rockets on them, and they were sending rockets in. The naval artillery fire, dive bombing. Our planes were dive bombing. There was an airstrip the Japanese held there at Zamboanga that was our target. We wanted to take that airstrip so we could operate.
Was this like January of '45? After Christmas of '44?
No, because we operated on the rice paddies at Luzon for until they secured Manila. So that was this would have been probably late spring or early summer of '45. And so then our LST got up speed, and it is a strange sight. You see us heading full speed toward the beach, pushing the big bow wave ahead, and the bow wave went up on the beach, and we went up behind it, and it was grounded, and the doors opened, and the ramp went down, and as Jap patrol, I had my squad of guys that was supposed to help unload the sea bags and put them on trucks.
How many were in the squad?
About 12. And we were down in the tank deck of the LST, and this Jap patrol came running out of the jungle and yelling banzai and so on, and they fired into the interior of the tank deck, and all of us dove for cover in the pile of sea bags, and their 25 caliber slug was ricocheted all around us in there. So anyway, the bow gunners on the LST drove them off. So then we got into the trucks, and they drove out of the LSTs across the beach, and we headed down a road toward a copra plantation, which is a bunch of palm trees all planted roads, to set up camp. We set up a camp there, and then the airfield was secured in
This is at Mindanao?
Mindanao, yeah. And our aircraft came in, and we started operating out of Mindanao. And while we were there, there was we call it a Long Tom, is a artillery piece that Japs had up in the mountains. And they were trying to fire and hit the ammo dump and fuel dump around the airfield. And our camp area was right in the line of fire. That we could hear the shells come swishing over our camp area, and they'd hit. They were pinpointing the perimeter of the airfield, trying to hit the fuel dump and the ammo dump. So one day, the colonel of our Marine Air Group 32 had enough of it, so he went up probably 20,000 feet, and he circled above that mountain area there, and he watched where for a muzzle flash, he saw they had it in a cave, this long time, the artillery piece. They would come out and fire, and then they'd put it back in the cave, and you couldn't see it from the jungle. But he watched for the muzzle flash, and he spotted it where it was, and he made a dive bombing run on that, and he knocked him out. He blew it up with the bomb. So then, we were down one day at the airstrip, getting our planes ready to fly a strike. We were flying strikes across the Straits of Borneo into North Borneo. The Japs still held Borneo. So we were down at the flight line getting our planes ready for another strike on Borneo when it was early morning, and a night fighter, one of our night fighters came in, and right behind him, almost on his tail, was a Jap bomber. He stayed right on the night fighter's tail, because then the blip on our defense radar would just show one blip, and they thought it was a night fighter. They didn't realize it. So as a night fighter landed, the Jap bomber strafed our flight line. All of us jumped into slit trenches and whatever cover we could get, because slugs were flying all around us, and they let a couple of bombs go and blew up some planes, our planes. Some air traffic controllers that were in a log, coconut log tower that they were up there about 2 stories high. When this took place, well, they jumped out of there quick. And after he made that run and strafed the field, strafed us, and bombed a couple of planes and blew them up, they just disappeared. He just totally surprised us. So, and then one night in our camp area, we could hear these Japanese voices. There was a band of them back in the jungle, and they were drinking sake and getting, that's the Japanese wine, they were getting high on sake, and they were getting bolder and bolder and bolder. And they would say, they couldn't say Marine, they say Maline. Tonight you die, Maline. And so they started an actual bonsai charge at nighttime and came bonsaiing through our camp area, and we all got into our foxholes that we had dug and drove them off.
This is on Mindanao?
That's at Mindanao, yeah.
Okay.
And the roads around our camp area when we first got there were mined with tank mines.
Mm-hmm.
Truck, vehicle, truck and tank mines. And I had to wire these guys that disarmed them. They really earned their pay. From a distance, we watched them as they carefully dug and probed around and then removed and disarmed the mines. It was fantastic. We lost one guy a couple of guys that were souvenir hunters. They went into one of these log bunkers that the Japs had built, and there was a Japanese Luger, and the guy, a nice looking automatic pistol, a Luger, and they picked it up, and then they picked it up, it was attached to a hand grenade and blew him up. A couple times that happened. It was, that was the place where we had the most contact with enemy troops, was there in Mindanao. They didn't want to give up that airfield, and they, although they were driven away from the airfield, they were still just beyond our camp area, and had to be careful.
Is this like late spring, early summer 45?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so eventually the Japs were neutralized and driven out of that area. And we continued to bomb Borneo. I remember seeing some prisoners that were taken, Jap prisoners. They were in trucks, steak body trucks. They were young guys, just like we were. So then, one night they had constructed, the CVs had constructed a movie theater, which is outside by put down coconut logs to sit on in rows, and they put up a screen, and we were watching a movie one night, and all of a sudden they stopped the movie and they said that the Japanese had been hit by the bomb was dropped, this was before, this was after the bomb was dropped. When the bomb was dropped, we got news about that, but it was kind of sketchy. We didn't know how a single bomb could,
You're talking about the atomic bomb.
atomic bomb, yeah,
Okay.
at Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Right.
But anyway, what was it, 9 days later, they surrendered. But we were at the movie theater, and they stopped the movie, and they said, the Japanese have surrendered, and boy, the place went wild. Everybody started, no more movie, everybody went crazy.
This was while you were still at Mindanao.
I don't know, yeah.
So that would have been like in August of '45.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So then, all the outfits of the Pacific were trying to outdo each other to get home. So we were transferred to a Navy base at Samar, which is a Philippine island. We had a Navy base there, north of Leyte, to try to wait for a ship to take us home. And we were there for several days, maybe a week or more. And finally, a carrier was available, and we got aboard the carrier and went to fleet anchorage at Ulithi, stayed there overnight, then from there to stopped at Pearl Harbor at Fort Island again, and then left there and came to, we didn't go back to San Diego, we went to Los Angeles. And we got off the carrier, and they processed us for gave us medical checkups, and we had stored all of our uniforms, our greens, and the good uniforms that you didn't need in the South Pacific, and we reclaimed them and got our belongings together again that were stored for us. We were all, oh, incidentally, when we were in the South Pacific, starting in Emeru, we had to take Atabrin, which was a substitute for
Quinine.
quinine, to keep us from getting malaria. And taking that every day, all of our skin turned yellow, and our whites of our eyes were yellow. We looked as yellow as the Japanese. So you could always tell when people got off the ships there in the States who came from the South Pacific, because we were all yellow. And it took a while for it to bleed out, but finally it whitened up. So after we were processed, it got our belongings back, our green uniforms and better clothes. Then we were given 30-day leave. And it's the first leave I had in the Marine Corps, was that 30-day leave then. I didn't have any other leave up till then. So we got another guy that's from Miami, and myself. We got on a Pullman, and we took a Pullman across the U.S. to our first place to change trains was in New Orleans. Went to New Orleans, we stayed overnight there, and then the next day we got a train out of there for Jacksonville on south, and I got home around Thanksgiving time of '45. From there, after the leave, I had to report back to north of Camp Lejeune was Cherry Point, Naval Air Station Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point.
Were you in a hospital in Texas at one time after the hostilities ended?
No.
Okay.
So, reported back to Cherry Point. North Carolina, at the Marine Corps Air Station, and that was assigned to Separation Unit Number 1. And they processed those of us there to get our honorable discharge. They gave you another medical checkup and had you sign a paper saying there's nothing wrong with you because they didn't want to be liable for any disabilities. And then they gave us allowance to so much a mile to get home. And I left there and went to Raleigh-Durham Airport and caught the Eastern Airlines DC-3 home. Oh, and when I arrived home, it was just before Thanksgiving, after being discharged. That's right, I forgot about that.
On the DC-3?
Yeah, on DC-3.
So when was this?
This would have been Thanksgiving of 1945.
And when did you arrive home?
Right, just before Thanksgiving.
Like Wednesday night before Thursday, Thanksgiving Day?
Something like that, yeah.
And where'd you come into?
Into Palm Beach International. In those days it was called Morrison Field.
Okay. Who picked you up?
I think my mother and father came out and picked me up.
Okay. Any other relatives, brothers, sisters, etc. there?
No, wait a minute. No, they didn't know I was coming in. They didn't know when I was coming in. I took a taxi home. That's right. Took
Okay.
a taxi home.
Okay. This was like Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, 1945?
Well, it may have been a day or two before Thanksgiving, but it was right around Thanksgiving.
Right. Third week of November 45.
Yeah.
Okay. And you took a taxi home, and what happened?
Well, we all were in a celebratory mood, and everybody rejoiced that that I was still in one piece and lived through the war.
You were in one piece, I presume.
I was very, oh yes, I was very thankful.
And how old were you in November of 45?
Well, let's see. I was 18 when I went in, and 42, 19 and 43, 20 and 44, 21.
Okay. So June of 45, June 14th of 45, you turned 21.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So this was like Thanksgiving Eve, Thanksgiving Day, 45, and you took a taxi home from Morrison Field in West Palm Beach, Florida. And where'd you go to?
Where'd I go to?
Where'd you go to from Morrison Field?
Oh, well, to my home at 617 37th Street in West Palm Beach.
In the state of Florida?
In the state of Florida.
And,
Incidentally, I forgot, talking about rank, while I was in the Philippines, I was promoted to technical sergeant,
Yeah.
and that was the highest rank I attained.
Mm-hmm. And so who was there when the taxi dumped you off on 37th Street?
I think my mother and father were there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were they surprised to see you?
Oh, yes.
Had you been discharged at that point?
Yes, I was honorably discharged.
Okay. And after you got home, I guess you had Thanksgiving dinner, etc.
Yes,
Okay, in West Palm Beach, Florida.
right.
And was that pretty much the end of your
active service in defense of democracy for the United States of America.
That was it,
Okay,
right.
all right.
And we were all issued, at Separation Center, Cherry Point, we were issued these little lapel pins for World War II veterans that were honorably discharged, and we called them ruptured ducks.
Why'd you call them that?
That was just a name given to them by the GIs. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's an actual eagle. It's an eagle flying, and they call it ruptured duck. So I still have my ruptured duck
I'll be darned.
lapel pin.
So we're sitting here in North Palm Beach, Florida, on I guess it's August 10th, 1999, 713 Kitty Hawk Way, North Palm Beach, Florida. Steve Hilker, your surviving son, Robert Hilker Sr., you. And the end of the 20th century is right around the corner. Can you give us your feelings as to whether it was really worth it all going through all that hell?
My feeling is that it was a job that had to be done, and after we were viciously and criminally attacked Pearl Harbor and killed innocent people for the adventure, some Japanese trying to dominate the Pacific theater for their own evil gains, that we had to do the job, and even though it disrupted the lives of all of the young people in the United States at that point, I think the sacrifice was well worth it. And it was a job that was there. The young people in the United States at that point saw the job and did it. And I don't think anybody regrets having done it.
And how old were you when Thanksgiving of 1945 happened and you were discharged?
21.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how old are you now?
75.
And you're still living in Palm Beach County, Florida, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there anything else you wanted to add, detract from, or supplement your statement as to what happened to you in World War II, and your feelings as to whether it was worth it then, and the future of democracy of the United States of America today and hereafter?
Well, as I stated, I think that we did the job that had to be done. I think the United States of America is the finest place on the planet, and I wish that the current generation had the patriotism that our generation had. Maybe it'll come back. I feel a little concerned that there's something lacking there today, but it will come back, I'm sure.
Okay.
One thing that I gained out of it is the discipline and self-reliance that Marine training instills in a person. And as they say, once a Marine, always a Marine. I have all of my friends that in the Marine Corps League. It's good to get together with them and trade off old war stories. The Marines are a band of brothers, and all through your life, if you see another Marine, it's just like a big fraternity. You have something in common, something to talk about, together. Anybody that's gone through that boot camp, it makes a bond that you'll retain forever.
All right. Well, Dad, I've taken a lot of videos of World War II veterans and D-Day, Bataan Death March survivors, and folks that were in the Pacific and the European theater. And thank God I was able to finally record your story. And took me till August the 10th, 1999 to do it. But I appreciate very much you spending this afternoon giving us a rundown on your experiences in World War II and perhaps the story of your sacrifice and the sacrifice of the generation which I really believe truly saved the world for democracy. Will be recorded as an inspiration for generations to come, both here in Earth and probably in space and otherwise. And God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. And would you like to give any final word to your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc., as to your hope and faith as to what you did was really worthwhile for a meaningful contribution to what's good and right about humanity?
Well, God bless you, son. I appreciate your doing this, and to my offspring and my future heirs, I say carry on the tradition, and Semper Fidelis, always faithful to the U.S.
Semper Fidelis. Thank you, Dad.